I want to make this preamble short. I don't like wasting your time. If you clicked on a tier list video, it probably means you know what this game is, but I never talk about it and I don't want to leave anyone behind. Godzilla Battle Line is a mobile game, and there goes the first wave of people, where you collect and build teams of characters from the Godzilla series, adjacent Toho kaiju movies, and whoever wants to collab with them. This game has quite the roster. It's yet another thorn in the side of people asking for a new Godzilla console game, but the fact that I've been playing Battle Line since launch day should be all the environmental storytelling you need to know what I think of it. I enjoyed quite a bit, but patches and absurd power creep has rendered the game's 100+ unit roster a bit of a mess. So I thought it would be fun to rank every army and monster unit to see how well they stack up. Maybe make a couple jabs at the meta along the way. Yeah, we're getting a little toxic for this one. I will be ranking these based on, mainly, my personal time with the unit. Other factors include how effective they are when working with other units and how good they were in the past. This video will inevitably be outdated, so I just want to make it a fun project you can go back and watch anytime. Don't take this too seriously. I think every unit has a purpose to someone, so if you think I ranked something unfairly, sound off in the comments. I might rank effect pieces at the end, but I find these the most boring to talk about. Unless your name is Dimension Tide or Kids, I can see any of these working in a team with them in mind. Or, you could just use the unmanned train bomb like everyone else. I'm not ranking leaders either. That might be a video for another time, but frankly I just want this to be a one and done sort of thing. For reference, I'm speaking as someone who's been hovering around Grand Champion, King of the Monsters, and King of the Monsters Plus for the past 3 or so years, so I don't know what the low rank meta looks like. We're starting in F tier because negativity can be fun sometimes. I'm putting the first 2 forms of Shin Godzilla here because they literally can't do anything. The second evolution slaps units when they get close, but it'll be dead before they get the first hit in. On the subject of death, in dead-ish last is the giant octopus. I mean, they knew what they were doing with this one. It was released in the same season as Shin Godzilla and Destroya. This is a joke character. There is a slight speed boost in the water, and it's nice that it can attack and slow down enemies in the air and on the ground, but all it takes is one swipe and the thing is dead anyways. You will only ever use this thing in all-star battles to get fun bucks you can use to buy an upgrade capsule for whatever the strongest unit of the season is. Next is Megalon. God, this doofus is not a 4-star unit. I'd imagine there's some niche use with how it can block healers on your side of the screen, and having a damage-reducing move is never a bad thing. But like, Varan exists now, and you can deploy him anywhere on half the map, and he doesn't need to attack first for his debuff. The only reason you'd have Megalon on the team is his low cost and if you were like, really desperate. It's such a shame, I really like the monster. Godzilla Tower. It's a stationary building that fires a beam that does exponential damage over time. It's a non-mobile Monsterverse Godzilla that only really has utility if you can manage to cycle through your lineup enough times to have more than one on screen. But at that point, you're just better off assembling other units. Ah man, this next one hurts. I love this kaiju so much and they did him so dirty. What you get for the amount of energy slots he requires, Zeton is just not worth it. This is a catastrophically bad unit. They made a shitty turret that does constant crappy damage, and the only thing making it more viable than the Godzilla Tower is its bigger health pool. But even the Godzilla Tower had the courtesy of letting its damage be exponential. There is a niche strategy. Not really niche since they're so desperate to give Zeton things to do that they actually talk about it in the introduction. But you can use the Kids Teleport to get Zeton closer to the opponent. But not only does it take 3 full rounds to get it within leader range, all it does is make Zeton a bigger target to get wailed on. It also means you have to dedicate a slot to kids. Kids! And for what? So you can get shot to death faster? The idea is to have it sit behind your leader and have it build up its crappy attack power, so the constant crappy damage it does turns into constant average damage. So why would you even want to send it further out before it could be even remotely usable? All of this headache for a unit that costs 8 energy bars. And don't tell me the explosion damage is worth it. If you send a Sachiella or a Burning Godzilla out far enough, you'll get the same results, and all they ask is $5. I hate how much they turned one of my favorite monsters into a joke. Okay, maybe he was already one, but he was a strong joke. Okay, in subsequent appearances, he got dealt with pretty easily. In Shin Ultraman, he was about to destroy a planet. How about that? Is that cool enough? Yeah, that still tracks. Speaking of jokes, Chibi Godzilla. It's the king of the F tiers. A really weak support monster that occasionally gives surrounding units a boost. It's there if you really enjoy luck and not winning. He's notable for being one of the only monsters here in their original proportions because they didn't have to do anything to make him fit in the art style. So that's something. On to D tier. This is the realm of mostly support units or ones that just barely miss being viable. Ones that were maybe usable a long time ago, but have become mostly obsolete. I'm gonna be real, a lot of the Ava units are difficult to place because the collab happened so long ago, and they're in such low circulation that I haven't seen them out in the wild in a very long time. What I can say is that Ava Unit 8 is the least good. It's a sniper, and that sounds good at first, but then she just stops being one. She had one thing, and she just gives up. Let me know if you've gotten any use out of Mari. I'm genuinely curious if she's worth investing in all these updates later. I'm also putting both of Asuka's Ava units here because I don't think I've ever seen them in the past 2 years, but she gets points for dropping in and having a stunning lunge attack in her beast mode. Those seem good. I don't know, she's also very slow. Again, these units haven't been in circulation in years. Tell me if you've found any use for them. Showa Gyaos is one of my favorite monsters of the 60s. It's a vampiric bat bird with a great angular design. The game translated this into it being weakened on half the stages in the game. It's only effective at night. Even in the night stages, the buffs aren't enough to make it better than enemies that don't even need buffs to be good. Stinks that there are units that can still be this bad this late into the game's life. It's been half a year since the Gotengo was put in the game, and I have yet to see it deployed on the battlefield. Its 7 unit energy cost is already a hard sell, but it doesn't even do great damage even at higher levels. It's meant to be a sponge that soaks up damage, but it also dishes out very little damage. It's a waste of a slot for now. The Stealth Bomber. I remember when this thing was uncontested in the first years of the game's life. Now you put this thing on a field and immediately realize you wasted a slot. There are so many counters for this thing now, it's not even funny. The Stealth Bomber / Mogera pincer attack is just a distant memory now. Up next is the Markalite Cannon. It's very easy to dismantle, truly in the spirit of the scene from the movie it's from where Mogera digs directly under it and it falls right on top of them. But if you somehow come across a team that doesn't have any counters for it, then it hits like a punch to the face. Larva Mothra isn't very good, but you probably knew that already. It's best used in combat by placing it behind other units, so it can web up approaching enemies. But like, the range is so short you might as well just place it further back to let it evolve in peace. Flying Form Hedera. This is a unit you send out to evolve into its better final form. That's it. In the past it had more use because of swarm enemies, but now that the swarms people use can look up, it's lost some of its function. It tears through shields, which is nice, but only send this one out for legitimate combat purposes if you're desperate. Set it up and back so it has time to evolve. Biolante's Rose Form sure is Biolante's Rose Form. It gets a small attack boost in the water, if you value that sort of thing. No, you deploy this thing so you can get the ball rolling for the much better unit. Aggregate Destroya is the first step towards something greater. It's nice that this one evolves so quickly. I've had matches where another unit that can only attack ground ones pulls up to it. Then Destroya evolves into the flight form and it gets to avoid the damage. Not much to say about this one. It's very low damage. It's like sending a baby onto the battlefield. It ranks higher than the other baby forms because it eventually turns into... 1964 Rodan is a unit that became pretty much obsolete right out of the gate. It's the flying version of Heisei Mechagodzilla and Anguirus in the sense that it's a really basic low-cost unit, but unlike those two and their decent health pools, Rodan here has to pray the enemy doesn't notice them as they attack. Pretty much outclassed by every single Rodan that appeared after. Spider-Og. Man, I remember when this guy was busted. His web attack stunned with every animation loop. Combine that with a low unit cost, and he was practically on every team that season. He's since been neutered into hell, and you'd never see him in teams anymore. Probably the worst fall from grace in the game. Aqua Mothra is good if you've already got units attacking the leader and you need another one over there fast, and there happens to be a huge body of water between you and them. And also if you don't happen to have Kiryu or Mogera on the team. So, it's not that good if you have to invent a scenario where it's useful. It's been about a year since this thing was added, and I don't see it often for a reason. Heisei Mechagodzilla is the most inoffensive, generic option you could ask for. No gimmicks, low cost, but despite being coated in diamond armor, it lacks the defense needed to be useful. This is the first unit to go when you find something better. EVA Unit 0. Rei Ayanami's got 3 stages here. Attack, defense, then a bombing attack where she blows herself up. But it's okay because they've got... She's fine if you deploy her with other units. You know, that's how the game works. But her stats are honestly inexcusable. Even her explosion damage doesn't hold a candle to King Caesar's headbutt, or even Sachiel's explosion. I think they straight up just forgot to update her. King of the D tiers. It's extremely funny to me that Monsterverse Godzilla is still one of the worst units in the game. He used to be much worse. He could get stun-locked by Minilla. But with time, some buffs to its health, and with help from his wife, he can kind of work in very specific situations. If he waltzes up to your leader unopposed with an army surrounding it, and you don't have a stunning unit for some reason, that exponential damage increase is legitimately scary. Otherwise, he's not worth the risk or the energy cost. C tier consists of the workhorse units, the one you would have in a quote-unquote competitive team and still get by with them. Anyways, Minilla gets the bottom slot of C tier because there was a point in time where he completely trivialized Monsterverse Godzilla, and that's just objectively funny. He's also really good at canceling out Godzilla Terrestris' attack, because for some reason the projectile isn't counted as a projectile, so it just becomes completely ineffective when it's interrupted. Other than that, Minilla is a decent support unit. Throw him behind some meat shields and he'll be annoying in a lore-accurate way. The original Mechagodzilla is good for at most 10 seconds, if it even lasts that long. Being able to disguise itself as and use the abilities and stats of every Godzilla in the game is actually really cool. But after they're hit by 2 attacks, they shed the disguise and they become really bad. Their main attack is ranged. It's a very long range too, but most opponents will already be close to them, so they can't even use the attack as intended before they're already dead. While I was grabbing footage, it actually proved to be a little better than I originally placed it. But having a ranged unit disguise itself as units that are meant to get up close to the enemy, and it itself not being built to take punishment, is a genuine design flaw that seems like something that would have been figured out during the drafting stages. It's a shame. I like the disguise mechanic too. Kamacuras. This is the quintessential vanilla unit to throw out to distract enemies. On that note, I'll rank the Dorats higher because it's the same idea but in the air, as well as the Kamacuras Swarm and Destroya Larva, which are the same idea but they cost more. Better distraction tactics exist now, but you can't go wrong with these guys on your team. I run the Dorats because of how they work with Showa Gamera, but more on that when I get to the higher tiers. The original Gigan. He runs straight for the leader and stationary units. It's like the stealth bomber but with more health. Very funny to see him fly when a Biolante leader uses her special in a wet map, but other than that, he is a very situational unit. Poor Megaguirus has some situational uses like slowing down approaching enemies, but now that most enemies have a wide ranged attack, the slowdown can do very little to stop their assault. She can still kinda pick at enemies, which is worth something. Tiny Jet Jaguar. This is pure support. It can't attack, it can't defend, it can only give units where it spawned an attack boost. For the energy cost and its evolved form, I really can't complain. Destroya's flying form. The last hill the kaiju has to overcome before he gets really good. Low unit cost, he evolves quickly, just keep him away from the front lines for long enough and you're golden. EVA Unit 1. This is a decent rush and attack unit that can hit ground and airborne enemies. It takes too long for Shinji to whip out his giant chain gun. In the time it takes for him to do so, he could already be dead. You have to make a team that bends over backwards for EVA Unit 1 to make it work. Man, Alien Mephiles is such a cool character. It's a shame his stats don't match his potential. Having a kick that stuns briefly is great, but his energy cost is too high for what he offers. It's like buying expensive shoes that fall apart the moment someone looks at them funny. I don't know where to put Ebira because I still don't quite understand it. Apparently it attacks units with attack buffs. I guess it's funny to bring out the lobster and have them pelt someone trying to power up with rocks. On the subject of units that are very good at niche uses that I don't really find enough time for, Giran. It sends out ninja stars and slices downward to remove any buffs the opponent has, but by the time it's removed the attack buff, it's already dead because its HP pool was so tiny. Probably ideal to deal with units like Delta Final Wars Godzilla, but that situation is probably more rare than a blood moon on a Friday the 13th on a Tuesday. I mean, I wrote this and then, I'm not even kidding, an actual blood moon happened. It was a Friday the 14th though, so I still don't think I'm going to be seeing any Delta Final Wars Godzillas in the wild. Monsterverse Kong is there if Bio Goji is waiting in the wings and you have no other alternative for a guy who walks forward very slowly and punches hard. They at least had the courtesy of lowering his unit cost when the much better Beast Glove Kong got added. Monsterverse Mechagodzilla, another one I really don't know that much about. I never got any good use out of him. It's needlessly picky about whether it attacks airborne units or not. It's that indecisiveness that prevents me from using him that much. The Super X used to be a really good ranged unit, but recent updates have not only added better options, but also seemed to change its stats enough for it to not hold up to the competition. Monsterverse Mothra is fine. Mirroring the movie, she's entirely working as emotional support for her Godzilla to make sure they don't get interrupted. Being able to slow down enemies at a wider range and giving some energy upon death are nice touches, but 6 energy bars feels a little steep for what she offers. Hey, it's the guy on the cover. Goji 89 is the unit you use if you want a tanky guy who punches grounded units very hard. He's also very easy to deal with, which is why you don't see him in higher tiers. Also, like, 7 energy? Really? For this? He's only worth that much because he's royalty. He doesn't have the talent like his peers. This guy is just a nepo baby who hasn't earned his spot. Decent at best. Hey Toei, can you please stop localizing it as Masked Rider? It's only going to remind people of Furbus. Shin Kamen Rider. Takeshi Hongo makes a great first impression, dropping in on the Cyclone, pushing enemies out of the way, but after that he just hangs around. He walks forward very slowly and he dies if you so much as sneeze on him. He gets points for presentation and I can't complain about the energy cost, but that's all he's got going for him. Makes for a great leader though. The Gyaos Swarm. These guys start off as only 2, but 1 gets added every time they're summoned. They're great when you really want to get the ball rolling on a really annoying swarm enemy. I've seen them used less and less often, especially after the update that added more unit slots. I mean, you could run a smaller team, but why would you want to limit yourself just to make 1 unit work as intended? This is a unit that got really screwed over by the mechanical changes to the game. The 10th Angel feels like it should be better than its slower, ground-only brother, but the appeal of the two to me is the explosion damage and I get more of what I want out of the other. The fact that this explosion is tiered so it's not a guaranteed punch to the groin is the real problem here. Still, 10th Angel is serviceable if you want a ranged aerial unit, just not the best. Gamera from the Gamera anime. Decent medium cost that's best used to get flying enemies away from you, very low attack power though. I don't have strong feelings towards this one. His Delta variant is much better. Biolante's final form. It charges forward and attacks in a medium range around it. The low cost for a unit with this health and this utility bumps it into being above average. Heisei Mothra is alright. She does chip damage over time. Her low unit cost makes her an inexpensive choice for a third wheel in a battle. The game considers the next unit an effect piece, but I don't buy it. I think the developers made a mistake here because it has the same utility as the other monsters. Mogera was the key to being annoying in the early years. With more options opening up and the unit cost fluctuating to where it is now, it's not worth it unless you want a budget Kiryu with less HP. Still a fun mix-up because of how fast its I-beams fire. Shmoo was almost a great unit, but it's one that practically requires an escort like it's a scared lost dog. Which is film accurate, I guess. She has a unique status effect, Frost, which does poison-like damage, and it leaves a little bit behind on the field. It's best used in combination with the evil Skarking, something even the developers realized when they combined them into a single unit. Anguirus. Good ol' Anguirus. Very slow, his moves take an entire century to finish, but he doesn't cost much and he has decent health. He's a lovable guy who can take a beating just for you. King Caesar. I still see this guy in regular matches. That 1000 damage value is nothing to scoff at. If you're properly prepared, he'll waste it on a shielded monster or something, but hey, there's a reason why people keep this guy around. He hits good. Mothra Leo is the same principle, just for aerial opponents. I've never found the impact to be as strong as Caesar's, and its regular beam attack is just pitiful. So I'm putting them about there. Yeah, that seems right. The helicopter base. On its own, completely unremarkable. All it takes is an effect attack to make it not worth the effort. But what if your opponent forgets to deal with it? That's when you get the situation where all the helicopters bunch up and, along with other units, deal insane damage. The same goes for the Mba bases, but to a lesser extent because they're stuck on the ground. I put the Mba unit on its own right about here too. All of these units are ideal for casting a shield over. Now we're getting into the Delta characters, my least favorite addition to the game. It's kind of neat seeing monsters already here getting another chance to shine with new lore-accurate movesets, but it's frustrating having an entire month dedicated to a monster they've already done. It feels like a waste of a slot. Anyways, Delta Bio Goji was one of the first ones they added, and he's like, fine. In true Heisei fashion, he spams beam attacks, so he can target aerial units. His health pool pales in comparison to his regular counterpart, but he's got an exploding AoE that I didn't get a lot of use out of. It's one of those units that's not really worth the cost. The original Burning Godzilla has a tiered explosion, making it less valuable than Sachiel or -1 Godzilla's nuclear launch codes, but it's on top of a unit that does decent damage for something with a medium cost. It alright. Pre-Strangulation Rodan. It's got a low cost and it gives other units a speed boost on top of being able to hold its own in a fight for a couple seconds. Yeah, good unit, but it only gets better when he dies. Larva Batra is surprisingly versatile as a quick pick-me-up character. It costs practically nothing to dish out to give others a quick power boost, and if it can't reach its slightly more expensive adult stage, then it's no biggie, just summon him again. You'll get the same benefits again. Godzilla Terrestris was one of the first evolution units alongside Batra and Mothra, and he was also easily the most capable. Having stats equal to a 2-star unit, it can hold off an attacker in a one-on-one with the help of its regenerating health. After that wears off, good luck finding ways to distract the other player to let Gorosaurus Godzilla over here reach his final form. Giant Jet Jaguar. This one's funny. It can completely trivialize units with long wind-up attacks and short range using his karate chop. Specifically Godzilla himself. It's a very low-cost unit too, which is handy, but it's not very helpful when it knocks enemies out of range of your other unit's attacks. I would applaud someone for running this guy in a normal team and making it work consistently. He's a likable pick. You've got an actual personality if you let this guy be on your team. Heisei King Ghidorah was at the top of the food chain in the first year. It was quickly overshadowed, and now it's perched atop the C tiers. It's decent for groups of enemies, but I honestly don't think dying to become Mecha Ghidorah is worth it. The stat boost you get when he dies is very, very tiny. It's not worth an entire extra slab of cheese. That's good enough to boot it from the team, but it's still a decent unit all things considered. While we're talking about Ghidorahs that aren't worth the price, Monsterverse Godzilla. It's a rallying support unit that doesn't do a lot of damage itself, but it does buff nearby friends. It's okay, but I don't know why it costs 8 energy slabs. The Delta variant costs less and is much better in general. Average unit, great leader. Final Wars Hetera. It constantly heals itself and it deals poison damage. I don't know what you want me to say. It's alright. It'll probably see more use when it falls into more people's laps, but I wasn't terribly convinced by it when it was spotlighted a couple seasons ago. I also don't know where else to put Goji 91, so he's being put here. It has the same beam spam as Bio Goji without the AoE, and he also has higher stats. Very boring unit. It gets the job done, I guess.
Godzilla 2000.
His atomic breath causes a giant explosion when it downs a unit, but I've barely found it helpful. It's very useful against swarms, but like, better options exist for dealing with those now. I don't know if you know this, but I love Ultraman. which is why it pains me that I can't put good ol' Lipia from Shin Ultraman here higher than C. He's a decent offensive support unit. His buzzsaw attacks come out fast, and combined with other long-range units like Godzilla Ultima, it's easy to take down a distracted opponent with high health. An immunity to getting stunned is also pretty nice. He's just not as good as units that fulfill the same role. His attack strength just doesn't hold up anymore now that fatter units have been added to the game. I'm also very sick of the buzzsaw sound effect. Very tentative placement of 2024 Mothra because, like, she seems better than the 2019 incarnation. She costs less, and she spits webs, and she has knockback. But this is another one I'm not terribly familiar with, so she's getting put here for now. For the first time ever, I don't think a Delta unit is as viable as the original. Delta -1 Godzilla has one use and one use only, to nuke the opponent's screen. He is very easy to deal with, it's just a matter of distracting or getting distracted enough for him to do his thing unimpeded. You'll start seeing more recent units as we hit the higher tiers here, because of the power creep, but there are still some old contenders desperately hanging on to relevancy in the bottom rungs of the B tier. I mean, I wrote that, but then I put Scar King in the first entry. He's one of the more recent units. He's here because he has the ability to drag units towards himself, so you always kind of want someone on the wayside to deal with the unit once they're dragged towards him. Scar King is kind of a gimmick, but I've seen him used quite a bit. Kiryukai is Kiryukai. I don't really have an opinion on him, especially since he represents a worse movie, but the different phases he's got makes him more versatile than most units. He starts the match on the defense, and then he enters offense. So if you can time the assault with other units, you could get something here. I'm putting Monster X and Kaiser Ghidorah in the same spot. I don't really have a strong opinion on them. They're good, but like, they're not what I use. You use Monster X if you want to scream, "Hey, I'm different from the other girls." It attacks, it hits good, maybe not as well as others, but it gets the job done. Delta Gamera is another unit I remember being way better during its season, and I'm not just saying that because its level increased along with your ranking, because my evolved Godzilla is just level 7 and it still cleans house. Level 5 is the point that stat increases for 4-star units starts giving diminishing returns, and don't let any whales tell you otherwise. The battle memory cards are meant to offset that. Anyways, this is all to say that Delta Gamera got seriously nerfed at some point, and even saying that feels crazy because not much has changed in how the monster works. When it spins, it does one kinda strongish attack with boosted defense, and it hits multiple times when it's low on health. The problem is that despite reeling back to avoid a hit, more often than not I see it getting hit anyways. Sorry Gamera, you're decent, but you can take solace knowing that this isn't the highest spot your franchise occupies on this tier list made by one random person. The Delta version of the first Godzilla has a lot of the same perks, except it can't be stunned and it attacks more than one enemy with a sweeping breath attack. It doesn't have the unique Godzilla bargain sale after it dies, so I can't say it's a substantially better unit. I like the original more. GMK Godzilla leaves behind a huge attack debuff, and then it does another attack debuff when it dies. It's a giant middle finger of a unit. I really like it. It gives the opponent something bad on the way out. It's thematically appropriate to the movie he's from. Don't forget the dead. Post-Strangulation Rodan, aka Fire Rodan. It has all the perks of the first form except it grants a little health boost upon death. Good unit. No notes. The first Godzilla, comparable in power to this game's face, Biogoji, except it can actually attack airborne units. It's decent for its cost and power, but getting a random discounted Godzilla after it dies is the real appeal here. Solid unit. The original Space Godzilla is a decent support pick. It'll leave behind crystals that the opponent has to stop to destroy, buying you more time to send in units that are now more powered up by those crystals. It's a predictable strategy, which is why Space G's more offensive Delta variant sees more use these days, but the OG is worth a shot too. Mega Maid Mogera is a good support unit, but I don't see it very often despite its utility. I guess its switching modes to be less useful halfway through is a factor, but I like that initial defense boost it gives. Underrated. Out of all the units from the Shin Ultraman collab, Naranga has had the most staying power. This taser on legs has all the potential of previous units with stunning moves, but this time there's some actual power behind it. It being almost guaranteed to get the first move thanks to the cloaking is also very good. It's still not the most useful these days with how many units are immune to being stunned, but he's a nice unexpected pick. Literally, because he sneaks. One of the more recent additions, it's unbelievable that Varan is this high in my ranking, but I think it's pretty believable. It's my ranking. These scripts are terrible, why do I even try? He's not the strongest B tier, he is still a 2-star unit, but the utility of just being able to place him anywhere on like 80% of the map and immediately giving the opponent a debuff without having to even attack first, and that it works on aerial and grounded units, all for the low price of a Varan? Duh, of course he's going to be this high. It's saying something that when the season changed and I forgot to take him off the team, I still saw success with this guy even at a reduced level. He's that good. Add him to the team before he gets neutered. Hedorah's final form is a simple and sweet one. Not the character probably smells terrible, but the unit is sweet. It spits out a small AoE attack, and when it dies it leaves behind some poison damage that can tear through shields and barrier easily. Its low cost helps this one stay pretty high up on the tier list for me. Delta Biolante. For a couple more energy than the original, it'll charge forward, have a wider range of attack, spit poison damage, and give you health upon death. There's a lot going on here. It's a decent pick if you have a bunch of units charging forward and need some extra health. The fourth angel, Sachiel. An inexpensive panic button you send out when you want to get a swarm of enemies off your ass. It has decent grounded unit damage, but that explosion ravages anything around it. He's a really good get the f*** off me unit. Super Mecha Godzilla is like the good version of those units in lower tiers that have slowdown moves. This one actually has some punch behind it. I don't use this one very often, so I can't list all the drawbacks. I guess the deployment is pretty slow. I get that they wanted to do a cute little transformation scene, but you know, that time really does add up. Final Wars Godzilla, one of my favorite designs for a decent unit. The tail whip is a good get off me move for aerials, and its atomic breath does good damage. I think this is more of a 6 energy unit than the 7 it actually demands. If it wasn't that expensive, I think it would see more use. Honestly, I don't have that much of an opinion on the Delta variant either. It gains more power the more units get deployed, and I'm sure someone's found a use for it, but for now I'm just going to place him here. The Ghidorah from Godzilla the Ride has a really cool intro where it attacks everything in a vertical line. After that, it's just okay. It speeds up and it locks in on an opponent, and it has decent damage output. It's good when buffed by other units. Orga. Gotta love Orga. He comes right back after he dies with half health but an even stronger beam. Very strange choice to only let it hit grounded units though, that's usually not the case with beams. I guess he's a gamer, he can't look up. That's what's keeping this guy on the lower end of this tier. He's still reasonably good against the other grounded opponents, and it's always a nice tactic to spawn someone after Orga dies, so the unit that defeated it is now too distracted to deal with the revived Orga. A similar placement for similar reasons is Kiryu Goji, both variants. He rushes in and slams into the first grounded unit it meets, then fires a beam once it's charged. The beam can hit aerial units, but not his regular attacks. I guess this one is a gamer too, he also can't look up. Not much difference between the forms, one has a stronger attack and a worse beam, and vice versa for the other. Solid unit. It's easy to trick, but it's totally usable. The Shinden, a low-cost unit that otherwise perishes after a couple hits. Spoilers, this is the last non-monster unit on this tier list. This was the ideal distraction for a while. It still has some use nowadays because it's so low cost, but I rarely see it. When it's defeated, you see a little parachute pop out, which is a nice little tie-in with -1. Kiryu is a bastard, but also a bastard I respect. Able to be launched at any part of the battlefield, it's like the big boy version of Mogera, and all it asks is for 1 extra gold bar of your time. Makes for plenty of good placement strategies to screw over the other player. The fact that it's able to be dripped out in Evangelion colors, and bringing back the original Kiryu pilot to voice act, makes this one of the cooler units in terms of presentation too. Desghidorah has been the staple prize of the All-Star Battle mode since its debut, and I've been seeing a lot more use of it now that it's been deemed viable. But here's the thing, it's always been good. It vomits out a barrage of fire damage on spawn, and its flamethrower breath has good range. It's a good, reliably strong unit. Shame about the movie it's from, though. That thing is terrible. Jet Jaguar PP. Along with Ultima, this was one of the first collab units, and it still holds up reasonably well. It's that shield mechanic that negates damage 3 times, and the low cost. It loses points for not being the strongest unit, but along with Beast Glove Kong, it can avoid several waves of attacks. It also loses points for that goddamn sound design. Stormy Ghidorah. This guy does chip damage to everything caught in the vortex surrounding him. It's like a flying wood chipper, and combined with Monsterverse Rodan, it's like a flying wood chipper that's on fire. Speaking of, Monsterverse Rodan is a good speedy supporter that's hard to hit, and he comes with a flame effect. It makes surrounding units the same speed as it, which isn't helpful with the units that are faster than it, but it's very helpful to the ones that aren't. I've been using it on my current team, and it's good enough to hold its own against some of the more annoying high tiers. He is a unit that is very good at distracting. Final Wars Gigan. Oh boy, this was the first unit they introduced that had me thinking there was a power creep issue. It only costed 4 energy bars, and it still does, and it immediately locks onto and stuns a grounded unit. Good for a quick double attack that takes out an opponent's shield and does decent damage until it inevitably dies. It's still Gigan after all, it's not going to be challenging any power scalers. It's just good for what it was made to do, slicing down the defense and taking out some weaker units. Godzilla from Godzilla the Ride is more than a little redundant as far as designs go. This was a season that happened after the -1 collab, and people were quick to point out how it was practically the same model, but he is a worthy unit. He has this unique skill that gives surrounding units and himself a critical buff, where the next attack does twice as much damage. Unless the opponent shields up or it sends an intentionally weak unit to tank the hit, the critical buff is worth keeping this Goji around for. Don't let his simplicity from the fact that he's an early unit fool you into thinking he's antiquated. Adult Batra is still reliable. It's low cost, gives surrounding units a power boost, and then it stabs through a ton of enemy HP. It'll die quickly, but it'll also come back quickly. It's a unit you deploy when you want to put on the pressure. Cool guy, one of my favorites. 4 years in, I still stand by Godzilla Ultima. He only targets one enemy, but it's with a long-reaching beam and he works really well in organized groups. Not a complicated unit at all, and that's why I like him. Gamera is the friend to all low tiers and makes running a team with 1 or 2 of them viable. The shield he casts after entering combat is really helpful for the small units clustered around him, and he casts it again if he's around long enough. His attack does good damage too. Thanks, Gamera. Delta Space Godzilla gets here by how its floating space crystals confuse the game's AI. They spend time trying to destroy the thing coming right at them, and unless they've got a sweeping attack, the other crystal will hit them before they have the time to react to it. He's also got a beam, and that bounces between close units. Overall, pretty good. You're more likely to see this in play because it's a really good way to lead the charge. Shin Godzilla should be better than Destroya. He costs 1 energy unit less, he can attack multiple flying enemies, and they roughly do the same damage. But what holds him back for me is how much slower it takes for him to evolve. Once you get him there, he's great, but it's a much slower burn than Destroya's evolution path, which actually has forms that can, damage things. Still, this burned bacon is a good unit. You want a Destroya that skipped all the boring parts? Well, here you go. This high school dropout still found success in life by slashing the defenses of approaching enemies. It's not an S tier because its beam equivalent, which I still can't figure out when he does that instead of the Horn Katana, is much worse than regular Destroyas, and his stats aren't as good, reflecting how it's a 5 cost unit instead of a 7. Delta Destroya's Horn Katana carries him. I could have sworn this guy was much more useful a couple patches ago. Seeing him alongside the gruesome twosome was very common. Basic Destroya's final form was a true top-tier unit until getting outclassed by everything that's above it. Getting hit by his beam is like getting shot in the head. But what really keeps this unit from being as good as anyone higher is how he can only attack 1 unit at a time. That's something even his underachieving brother can do. Still, annoying the enemy one more time by deploying larva upon death could be the tiny edge you need to deal with someone who is on the verge of dying anyways. Godzilla Earth. When he's not blowing out your phone's speakers, naturally costs the most out of any unit in the game next to, fittingly, anime Ghidorah, and several patches made him even scarier. A unit of this size and power quickly demands your attention. That said, he's fairly easy to deal with these days with the options we have now. Still, any unit that literally screams, "Hey, deal with me first," is worth a high ranking. This Mechagodzilla has a name so long it borders on parody, so I'm just calling it Anime Mechagodzilla. Anime Mechagodzilla could be swapped out for a lot of other high energy cost units, but I put him here because he's a fairly one-note, pretty good unit. He spawns with a tight defense. He's basically a turret when he's not walking forward. Good unit, maybe a little too expensive, but he kind of deserves it with the power he has. Gigan Rex summons a posse of weaker Gigans that do continuous damage. Like Zeton, but not shitty. Basically, any unit that summons other units is worth investing in. They can seriously overtake the whole screen. Skarking X Shmoo No Lemons is the same type of unit. They summon a bunch of gorillas when they get scared, and use the distraction to cut the opponent's defense. Generally good to use this in combination with Gigan Rex to block out the sun. GMK Ghidorah, no I'm not calling it by its full name, is another unit that demands attention when deployed. As long as it's not targeting multiple enemies, its 3 beam attack has the impact of a point-blank shotgun blast. Just absolutely tears through health bars. The Mothra Batra Power Hour. They take turns zapping you, and Mothra heals Batra and other surrounding units. Do I even need to elaborate why this is S tier? Geez, this is the type of service you can get with a 6 energy unit? No wonder Mephiles is stuck in C tier. The passage of time f***ing obliterated that guy. Bagan's been making a comeback lately. After years of being a meme specifically to me, he's been getting a lot more acknowledgement, and I'm proud of him. So proud, in fact, that I'm willing to put him this high, because he's also a good unit. He's very basic. Only having one attack these days would normally be a death sentence, but the fact that it targets multiple units makes him the necessary poison to deal with the uptick in duos as of late. The Gigan Rex and Skarking strategy I talked about earlier, this guy was made to counter that. It's like Delta Space Godzilla's beam, but good. Welcome back from obscurity, Bagan. I hope you enjoy your stay, at least until you get nerfed. -1 Godzilla is the new panic button. About to be attacked by a swarm of enemies in a stage conveniently filled with water? Drop this guy and he'll deal with it. It's actually obscene that this guy still costs only 6 energy bars. I thought they would have made him more expensive by now. He's really good. There are a lot of ifs that go into Monsterverse burning Godzilla's placement here. If you can let him survive his long gestation period, and if you give him support when he's ready to go, you've got a formidable friend working for you. Every attack is a Ghost Mothra AoE, and he's going to be regenerating for a very long time. It's difficult to approach this guy if you can't stop him in time. Beast Glove Kong is the best pure ground unit in the game. He has a built-in shield like JJPP, he dishes out great damage, and his ground slam lets him damage every nearby unit even if they're airborne. He's also completely invincible during the startup of the animation too. He's the Monkey King for a reason. Wow, the 2 units made for each other are right next to each other on the tier list, what a shock. Evolved Godzilla, C tier confirmed first draft redesign, S tier unit. Drop this guy next to a bunch of weaklings and it'll go to town. He is fairly easy to stunlock because he gives his attacks so much pomp and circumstance, like each one needs 4 years in a summer semester to come out. But when that breath attack connects, dude, it's worth the 7 bars it took to deploy this absolute unit. Why in God's name would you ever use Bio Goji? Rainbow Mothra. Evolved Leo's attack power is deliberately weak to make up for the giant umbrella it casts that adds a shield to nearby friendlies. That's 1 free hit that unit can take now, and in some situations, that saves them from losing half their health. He is the ideal support. The S in S tier stands for Super Godzilla, the most recent addition to the game along with Bagan and the subject of future nerfs. Being able to restore 1/3 of his health already works wonders when he's paired with other healer units, but man, his attacks are just so cool. It's described in the game as a defensive unit, but it dishes out just as much as it takes because of how this energy bar works. This does mean that a lot of the strength of this character comes from him being constantly damaged, and there's inherently kind of a problem with that. But I think there are enough try-hard Shin Godzilla leaders out there opening matches with their special move where they vomit everywhere, for that to actually work in Super Godzilla's advantage. Godzilla Brazil Edition is a unit that forces you to wait. It's a better version of Monsterverse Godzilla all the way back in D tier, featuring a beam attack that fires from halfway across the map for a limited time. And he can change what halfway means when he starts walking forward. He moves the battle line, that's how good he is. He's relatively easy to deal with after his bar depletes, but this Godzilla is the only one in the entire game that forces you to play by its rules. If one of your best units starts getting hit by this thing and it's got more than half of its beam bar left, it's a guaranteed death. God help you if it gets spawned during the final push. Let me tell you how much I've come to loathe the Chibi combo special. When this bastard of a unit first appeared, it was all over. More and more duos kept getting introduced, and it was because of this thing. And the game's only marginally recovered now that there are more duo units to choose from. There is so much going on with these two. When Mechagodzilla gets hit, he becomes an instant distraction. When Chibi Godzilla dies, Mecha gets a ton of buffs. If Mecha dies, then Chibi can revive him if not dealt with right away. Chibi's breath has a burning effect, and Mechagodzilla's can stun. I hate dealing with these little freaks. Sure, the stats are intentionally low, but their inexpensive cost and all of the above makes them very easy to slot into just about any lineup, and that makes them extremely dangerous. It's hilarious that a unit that looks and is just this is this good. S-tier joke. Really funny, guys. The show they're from is also funny. Just keep these f***ing things away from me in battle line. Quick effect piece tier list so people don't yell at me more than they already are. Dimension Tide is the worst. It drags units away, but Shin Kamen Rider displaces the same way and it costs the same amount. Kids teleports units closer in the same time it takes for them to walk over themselves. Freezing Sand is only used by bots. All Missile Strike users have to do is wait for one more bar and they can use Kiryu for the same effect. Anime Ghidorah slowly strangles units to death and is decent if you don't mind waiting for it to fully charge. Healing Chorus heals. And the unmanned train bomb costs less than a candy bar and disrupts any and all attempts at base spawning. So there. So what have we learned here today? Going back and checking out every unit again for this video really made me appreciate ones that I didn't think much of before. At the end of the day, there's always a unit for someone. No matter how bad they are, you can make them work. Also that I've been waiting nearly half my life for a successor to the PS4 game. Oh my god. They made me play a mobile game? What have they done to us?
What did they do to us?
Here's a shout out to top patrons. Zbolt, Sammy Heim, Lemon Boy, Adelaide, Taito Salad, Serix, Nerdy Gamer 556, Neon Yaminair, J King, Mech, Celis Ortesia, Blind Man, Greninja Zack, Old Metal Possum, Solid Lib, Dinosaurana, Kadorian, Scooter Jit, Mego Muddy, Lobotomy Blues, Cool Bell Zero, Eric Guzda, Janos Firewalker, Easterman, Minilla Fan, Sampai, Big Dumb Media, Jacob Hinch, Dude Bro, Alistair Gilmore, Seamus Kelly, Fujoshi Urinal, Ulan Nguyen, Irrelevant 402, Heian Mooney, Krazak 53, Queer Kaiju, Chronicler Waba, Brian Santa Cruz, Avok Robot, Godzilla Rich, It's God Z, An Actual Dimetrodon, CMG, Red Comet Harry, and Marpzilla. Thank you all very much. No, none of your money went towards this game's gacha.